Some houses glow with lights all night long, yet inside, the silence is suffocating. A wealthy father, twin children who lost their mother, and 10 nannies who had all walked away. They didn't leave because the pay was low, but because those fragile little hearts were not easy for anyone to step into. Then one day, an ordinary young woman appeared. No title, no fortune, only carrying a patient heart. And from that very moment, the fate of the entire family took a different turn. Before we dive deeper into the story, let me ask you this. If you had to rate this journey, from loss to the miracle of return, how many points out of 10 would you give it? Leave your number in the comments, and by the end of the video, let's see if that score changes. Hold on tight, because this story will make you believe. Sometimes family isn't born of blood, but of hearts brave enough to stay. Chicago, a late autumn morning. The city was still alive with the rush of cars streaming down Michigan Avenue, but on the 38th floor of a glass tower, Adrian Cole's apartment lay under a suffocating silence. So heavy was the quiet that even the tick of the wall clock sounded like clashing metal. Adrian stood before the vast window, tie still loose, his eyes fixed on the gray-green surface of the lake outside. Under the pale sunlight, Lake Michigan stretched endlessly, cold and empty like the hollow in his chest. It had been 3 years since his wife passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him alone with their twin daughters, Lily and Emma, who had just turned 2 at the time. If not for Mrs. Margaret, the nanny who had been with the family for over 15 years, Adrian might have collapsed that very day. She was both the gentle hands through long nights of crying and the steady shoulder when Adrian himself didn't know how to be a father. The girls called her by the tender name Nana, and indeed, she was like the grandmother they never had. But 6 months ago, another blow struck. Mrs. Margaret's husband suffered a stroke and needed long-term care. Through tears, she had no choice but to leave Chicago and return to her hometown in Ohio. The day she left, Lily and Emma cried until their voices were hoarse, clinging to her skirt as though letting go would make their whole world collapse all over again. Adrian stood by, heartbreaking, because he understood that a second loss was far too much for such small hearts to bear. From that day on, the Cole apartment never regained its warmth. In just 6 months, 10 nannies had come and gone. Some left after only 3 days, others managed a few weeks, but all eventually gave up. The reason was never the salary Adrian paid more than anyone else in the industry but the twins themselves. Lily and Emma didn't scream or throw tantrums. Instead, they stared blankly with hollow eyes, or quietly staged unsettling mischiefs that left adults shaken. One nanny trembled as she described Emma covering the kitchen in white flour and sitting motionless in the middle of that flour storm, whispering her mother's name. Another found Lily hiding in a wardrobe, wrapped in a blanket, staying there for hours. The girls need therapy. It was the familiar sentence Adrian had heard 10 times from 10 different people. And then they all left, treating the twins not as grieving children, but as difficult patients. Adrian never blamed them. He blamed himself. A man who could sign billion-dollar contracts with a single handshake was powerless in front of 2 innocent faces. He knew his daughters didn't need more therapists or sterile treatment schedules. They needed someone who would truly stay. Someone brave enough to step past the small walls they had built after so much loss. But in 6 months, no one had managed. This morning was no different. On the long dining table, bowls of cereal sat untouched, the milk gone cold. Lily and Emma sat opposite each other in silence. Neither ate, neither looked up. Adrian gripped the handle of his briefcase and moved toward the door, but his steps faltered. He remembered the old days, when Mrs. Margaret was still there, and breakfast was always noisy. Her stories, the girls' ringing laughter, even his own grumbling when forced to drink an extra glass of orange juice. Now, only emptiness remained. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his assistant. Last candidate today, Sophia Hart. 10 o'clock. Adrian exhaled heavily. He had no expectations left, but he didn't want to give up. Not for himself, but for his daughters. He tightened his tie, took a deep breath, and stepped into the elevator. Somewhere, deep inside, a small voice whispered, "This will be another failure." Yet that same fragile voice added, "But maybe, just maybe, this time will be different." 10 o'clock sharp, Adrian sat in his vast office on the 38th floor, where an entire wall of glass looked out over the gray-green expanse of Lake Michigan and the endless rooftops stretching to the horizon. On the desk before him lay a thick stack of files, names of those who had walked into his life and just as quickly walked back out, leaving only disappointment in their wake. He had steeled himself for the same pattern again, a new face, a few words exchanged, and then the inevitable end, forcing him to consider boarding school or sending his daughters to live with relatives in England. When his assistant entered to announce the final candidate had arrived, Adrian merely nodded, his voice clipped and cool. "Send her in." The door opened, and Sophia Hart stepped inside. Adrian felt an unexpected flicker of surprise. The young woman looked 27, 28 at most. She wore a simple pale blue dress under a worn gray cardigan. Her hair was tied back loosely, stray strands falling free, giving her an air of ease rather than polish. Unlike the other applicants who came dressed as though for a corporate conference, Sophia looked ordinary, approachable. Yet her blue eyes were bright and steady, unflinching before the austere weight of the office. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. I'm Sophia Hart," she said, extending a small hand. The handshake was firm, yet warm, neither timid nor forced. Adrian's brows rose slightly. He had encountered every kind of grip, trembling, overbearing, desperate to impress, but in Sophia's touch there was only quiet presence. He motioned for her to sit and cut straight to the point. "I won't waste your time. This is the last attempt. After today, I will consider either boarding school or sending my daughters to England. In the past 6 months, not one nanny has lasted longer than a week." His voice rasped on the final words, weariness bleeding through the steel. Sophia nodded, offering no premature promises. Instead, she asked softly, "Would you tell me about Lily and Emma?" Adrian blinked. No candidate had ever begun with that. They usually asked for schedules, discipline methods, rules of compliance. No one had simply asked about the children themselves as people, not routines. He turned his gaze to the lake, his voice low. "Lily is sensitive, easily moved, withdrawn. Emma is the opposite, stubborn, quick-tempered, always trying to shield her sister. Since Margaret left, they've closed in on themselves. I've tried everything, but no one has truly reached them." Sophia listened without interruption. No pen scratching notes, no polite interjections. She only inclined her head as if each word carried weight. When he fell silent, she replied gently, "They don't need to be fixed, Mr. Cole. They just need time, and someone who truly stays." Adrian looked at her, startled. That was exactly what he believed, though no one had dared put it into words. He studied her a moment, then asked, "Do you have any formal qualifications?" A pause, then honesty. "I studied elementary education in Portland. It was my dream since childhood, but when my mother fell ill, I had to leave school and work. I've been a tutor, a babysitter, anything that kept me close to children. One day, I hope to finish my degree." Adrian frowned slightly. He was used to glossy resumes, candidates flaunting experience in elite schools or prestigious households. Sophia had nothing but candor. Yet something in her eyes carried a conviction he hadn't seen in months. She reached into her bag and unfolded a single sheet of paper, not a padded portfolio, but a handwritten pledge. Trial period, 6 months. No promises of immediate change, no guarantees of miracles. Only presence, patience, and daily effort. If it doesn't work, I will leave without complaint. At the bottom, in delicate script, one more line. Some hearts take longer to heal. That doesn't mean they're broken. Adrian sat still, reading it twice, 3 times. He thought of all the weary eyes, the sighs of resignation, the unspoken judgment that had filled this office. And for the first time, he felt he was being offered not a contract, but a truth he could trust. "When can you start?" His voice was rougher than he intended. Sophia smiled, clear-eyed and certain. "Tomorrow. But first, if you allow me, I'd like to meet Lily and Emma. Not as part of an interview, just to say hello." Adrian hesitated, then nodded. And at that moment, in the heaviness of his chest, something fragile yet undeniable stirred hope, faint but real. The next morning, Sophia arrived promptly at 7, 15 minutes earlier than scheduled. She carried only a small canvas bag with her, holding a few simple items: a picture book, several spools of colored thread, and a worn teddy bear patched many times. Adrian was already dressed in a crisp navy suit, ready for work, but his face showed the strain of unease. From down the hall came the sounds of crying mixed with heated protests. He exhaled, his tone firm yet resigned. "Emma refuses to get dressed, and Lily says her stomach hurts, and locked herself in the bathroom. Every morning is like this." Sophia set her bag down and walked to the bathroom door. She didn't knock loudly or issue commands. Instead, she lowered herself to the floor, her voice soft as a whisper. "Lily, it's Miss Sophia. I heard you're not feeling well today. I brought along a little friend I'd like you to meet, but only if you'd like to see him." For a moment, silence lingered. Then, the faint click of the lock. The door cracked open, revealing a pair of swollen eyes red from tears. Sophia held out a brown teddy bear wearing a tiny gray sweater, its seams carefully stitched. "This is Benny. He worries a lot, and sometimes his tummy hurts too. He needs someone who understands him." Lily hesitated, then reached out, clutching the bear tightly and burying her face in its fur. Sophia smiled and brushed her hair gently. "Would you show Benny your school uniform? He's never seen a kindergartner's uniform before." Lily blinked, then nodded and pulled Sophia into her room. Meanwhile, Emma sat stubbornly on her bed, arms folded, hair tangled, her little face set in defiance. When Sophia entered, she jutted her chin. "I'm not going to school. No one can make me." Sophia didn't argue, didn't coax. She simply sat down at the edge of the bed, leaving a respectful space between them. From her bag, she pulled out a few strands of colored thread and began carefully knotting them into a bracelet. Her voice remained calm. "Every day I spend 20 minutes on what I call worry time. That's when I think about everything that makes me angry, sad, or scared. When the bracelet is finished, I leave all those feelings inside the thread. Today I plan to make 3, one for Lily, one for you, and one for myself. Would you like to help?" Emma stared at her, eyes glistening, before slowly inching closer. A small hand reached out to grasp the piece of blue yarn Sophia offered. She didn't push or praise, just continued knotting at a steady rhythm, allowing Emma to follow. Within minutes, the child's attention was absorbed in the weaving, her earlier resistance fading into focus. Adrian stood in the doorway, silent, astonished. In less than half an hour, Sophia had soothed both girls, not with commands, not with bribes or threats, but with patience and startlingly simple methods. When Lily and Emma finally appeared in their uniforms, backpacks strapped on, Emma clutching her new blue bracelet, Adrian bent down, ready to thank Sophia, but she only shook her head and whispered, "Go on to work. I'll take them to school. What matters is that you keep your promise to be home on time tonight." He blinked, caught off guard, then nodded and stepped out the door with an unfamiliar lightness in his chest. That evening, when he returned, the apartment no longer carried its familiar chill. On the living room rug, Lily and Emma sat giggling as Sophia read aloud, her voice shifting from character to character with playful animation. The faint scent of baked cheese lingered from the kitchen. When they saw him, the twins sprang up, not clinging to him in desperation as they had in the past, but exclaiming with delight, "Daddy's home." Adrian froze, heart aching at the contrast. The room felt warmer not just from the lights, but from the sound of unrestrained laughter he thought he had lost forever. In that moment, Adrian realized this young woman had not brought a temporary solution. She had brought hope, and hope had already begun to kindle in a home he once believed extinguished. In the days that followed, The atmosphere of the apartment began to shift, as though a long-shuttered house had finally opened its windows to let the light spill into every corner. Mornings, once a battlefield, grew less strained. Lily no longer feigned stomachaches to hide in the bathroom, and Emma stopped screaming whenever someone tried to slip her into her uniform. Sophia turned the chaos into play. Benny the teddy bear became the judge, who awarded points for who dressed the fastest and neatest, while colorful bracelets served as tokens of courage for those who overcame their fears. The girls began to laugh more, and their laughter echoed through the rooms, chasing away the emptiness that had lingered so long. Adrian, despite the weight of meetings and deadlines, noticed the difference in the smallest of details. One evening, walking into the kitchen, he found Sophia and the twins baking cookies together. Flour dusted the counters, star-shaped cutters produced crooked outlines, and the air rang with giggles louder than the oven timer. Emma proudly held up a misshapen cookie, edges burnt. "Daddy, taste this one. I made it myself." Adrian, a man accustomed to perfection, bit into it, and found it sweeter than any dessert served in a five-star restaurant. On other nights, Sophia read aloud from storybooks, her voice shifting from the low growl of a witch to the high trill of a fairy. Lily and Emma nestled against her, eyelids heavy with sleep. Adrian lingered in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe, drinking in the sight, a tableau of family life he had thought forever lost. When the girls finally drifted off, Sophia tucked them in and began gathering the books. Once, when she bent to pick up a stray crayon, her hand brushed against his. The contact lasted only a second, but it startled them both. Adrian pulled back quickly. Sophia gave a faint, awkward smile. Yet their eyes, for that brief instant, had carried something unspoken neither dared to name. Gradually, Sophia brought back experiences that Margaret once wove into their lives. She took the girls to the nearby park, where autumn leaves carpeted the ground, teaching them to collect and press the brightest ones into a scrapbook. She encouraged Lily to write a few short lines beneath each leaf. "Today the wind was strong, but I wasn't scared anymore." Emma added doodles of smiling faces. Those little journals became treasures, and Adrian marveled at how his daughters cherished them. He himself began to join in, not because Sophia asked, but because he wanted to. One late evening, instead of shutting himself away in his office, he wandered to the living room and found Sophia teaching the girls how to fold paper cranes. His large hands fumbled clumsily with the creases, making Emma collapse into laughter. Sophia gently guided his fingers, showing him how to pinch the corners. The warmth of her touch jolted him, both strange and familiar. Their eyes met briefly, then both looked away too quickly. But it was those small things that revived a household gone cold. Silent meals were replaced with chatter. The refrigerator door filled with colorful drawings. Hand-washing contests, and ended with squeals of delight. Watching his daughters smile again, Adrian felt the hollow in his chest gradually fill. And he knew this transformation hadn't come from money, nor from any expert he had ever hired, but from a young woman who believed that broken hearts deserved patience, not prescriptions. On rare nights, after the girls had fallen asleep, he and Sophia would sit together. They didn't talk about work or the future, just fragments of life. A diner where Sophia once waitressed, a childhood memory of Adrian's from the suburbs. Sometimes they said nothing at all, sipping tea in comfortable silence, the kind that felt nothing like the oppressive stillness that used to haunt the apartment. This was a silence that breathed, that soothed, as if they had discovered a shared language without words. And then, one late night, as Adrian passed the girls' room, he overheard Lily whisper to Emma, "If Miss Sophia stays forever, I won't be sad anymore." The words pierced his chest, stopping him in the dark hallway, eyes stinging. In that moment, Adrian realized it wasn't only his daughters who longed for her to stay. It was him too, more deeply than he had dared to admit. November brought with it the first chill winds of the season, the maples lining Michigan Avenue, shedding golden leaves like a carpet across the streets. One afternoon, just as Adrian stepped out of Cole Towers, his assistant delivered the news, Evelyn Cole had arrived on a flight from London. For years she had lived in her stately home on the outskirts of the city, rarely traveling, appearing only when something truly mattered. This time the reason was clear: she wished to see her granddaughters, and she wished to see with her own eyes how they were living. When the sleek black car pulled up before the tower's entrance, Lily and Emma squealed, "Grandma!" and ran to the door. Evelyn opened her arms wide, gathering them close, the faint scent of her perfume rising from her wool coat, her voice rich and warm with a trace of English cadence. She loved them deeply. Adrian had never doubted that, but her love always came laced with the discipline and precision of a woman who had lived her entire life by rules. Sophia stood a step behind, offering a gentle, natural greeting. Evelyn inclined her head in return, though her sharp eyes lingered on the young woman a heartbeat longer, as though weighing the presence of this stranger now folded into her family's orbit. That evening, under the sparkle of a crystal chandelier, dinner was laid out in elegant formality, yet the mood was surprisingly warm. Lily chattered excitedly about Benny the teddy bear, while Emma proudly displayed her blue thread bracelet made with Sophia. Evelyn nodded, lips curved in a smile, though her gaze flicked, appraising. When Adrian and Sophia rose together to clear the dishes, their movements in such quiet sync, it felt like unspoken agreement. With a mother's instinct and a lifetime's discernment, she saw instantly what the two of them were not yet willing to admit: a fragile thread of feeling, already beginning to weave itself. Later, when the girls were asleep, Evelyn invited her son to the sitting room. The soft glow of the lamp cast her profile in gold against the wall. Her tone was calm but resolute. "Adrian, I see that Sophia is a good girl. She cares for the children. But you must think further. Lily and Emma need a stepmother who is accomplished, educated, and established, someone who can guide them, protect them, and uphold the family's honor. Affection alone is not enough to sustain a household." Adrian sat motionless, fingers interlaced, his gaze lowered. He wanted to protest, to say that Sophia had brought laughter back into his daughters' lives, that no pedigree or position could replace a heart willing to stay. But the words snagged in his throat. His silence weighed like a scent. At that very moment, Sophia was carrying in a tray of tea. The door to the sitting room was ajar, and the words carried clearly through. She stopped, her hands trembling ever so slightly. Evelyn's voice was not harsh. It was gentle, almost kind, and perhaps that made it worse, carving the words deeper. Most painful of all was Adrian's silence. He had not contradicted, had not defended. Sophia turned quietly away, her chest tightening as though the lamplight from that room had shut her out. That night, in the small room she called her own, she sat for a long time by the window. The city's glow painted her face with both calm and sorrow. She thought back to Portland, to the days when she had been a student of education, to the morning her mother fell ill, and she left school behind to work anywhere she could. The dream of becoming a teacher had never died. And now, suddenly, it seemed the perfect reason to walk away before her heart sank any deeper into something as fragile as this. And so, in a grand apartment in the heart of Chicago, 3 souls slept peacefully, while one young woman lay awake until dawn, her heart heavy with questions no one could answer. Evelyn stayed in Chicago just over a week. She devoted every moment to her granddaughters, taking them to the park, buying picture books, recounting stories of Christmases in London. Then, on a crisp morning, she packed her bags and returned to England. Lily and Emma clung to her tightly, reluctant to let go, but Evelyn soothed them with the promise she would be back soon. Her figure faded behind the closing doors, leaving behind a quiet emptiness in the apartment. For Adrian, her brief visit only reinforced a heavy weight pressing silently upon his chest. For Sophia, it was a reminder of how fragile her place in this family truly was. A few days later, after dropping the girls at school, Sophia found a thick envelope in the mailbox. On the front was the familiar handwriting of an old classmate, someone who had once shared lecture halls with her in Portland. Inside, the letter explained that this friend had secretly submitted an application for a scholarship on Sophia's behalf, and to her astonishment, it had been accepted. A full scholarship, granting her the chance to return and complete her teaching degree. The dream she had been forced to abandon when her mother fell ill. As she read the last line, "I know you still long to be a teacher. This is your chance to chase that dream again." Her hand trembled. Her heart swelled with joy and sorrow, elation at the dream reborn, anguish at the knowledge that to seize it, she would have to let go of this home she had come to love. That night, after tucking Lily and Emma into bed, the girls clung to her tightly. Lily whispered, "Miss Sophia, tomorrow you have to finish the fairy story." Emma wrapped her small arms around Sophia's hand, her eyes shining in the dark. "You have to promise you'll stay a long, long time." Sophia smiled faintly, but inside it felt as if something tore. She could not promise them, because to promise would be a lie. When the girls finally drifted into sleep, Sophia sat in the quiet living room, laid a blank sheet of paper on the table, and wrote her farewell. "Mr. Cole, I leave not because of any wrongdoing, but because I believe this is what's best for Lily and Emma. They need someone who can stay for the long road ahead, someone truly worthy of guiding them as they grow. I know I am not that person. I am grateful for your trust, but I cannot go on knowing my place is uncertain. Please tell the girls that I love them, wherever I may be." The next morning, when Adrian entered the living room, the letter lay neatly on the table. He picked it up and read each line slowly. There were no reproaches, no tearful pleas, only a calmness so sharp it hurt. He sank into a chair, his eyes fixed on nothing. In his mind, the old arguments circled. She was only a nanny, destined to leave like the 10 before her, nothing different. But his heart betrayed every defense. The hollowness inside him spread, suffocating. He refused to name the feeling, refused to admit to himself that it was something more than gratitude. Yet all he knew was that this loss cut deeper than any before. Adrian crumpled the letter in his fist, then smoothed it out again, as if the motion might somehow hold her here. But the room stayed silent, and the absence she left behind grew heavier with each breath. He sat there a long time in the thick stillness, telling himself this had been her choice, that he ought to respect it. Yet, in the deepest part of him, he realized for the first time in years someone had entered his life who terrified him to lose. After Sophia left, the vast apartment on the 38th floor seemed to sink back into its former state, but heavier, lonelier than ever. The sound of laughter no longer rang from the living room. The faint scent of cookies no longer lingered in the kitchen. Gone, too, were the little arms wrapping around Sophia's neck each night before bed. What remained was silence, thick and suffocating, so heavy that sometimes even the whistle of wind against the glass made Adrian's heart ache. Lily withdrew again, clutching Benny the bear wherever she went, even to school, her eyes often vacant, as if searching for someone who was no longer there. Emma grew more defiant, snapping at both her father and her teacher. One afternoon, when Adrian came to pick them up, the teacher sighed and confided that Emma had refused to join art class. Instead, she had sat in the corner, scrawling one word over and over in uneven letters: Sophia. Adrian's chest twisted at the sight of the paper. All he could do was apologize softly and lead his daughter home in silence. Evening meals, already rare in their warmth, turned unbearably heavy. Adrian sat across from his daughters, food laid out in abundance, but no one lifted a fork. He tried gently, "Would you like a little more soup, Lily?" She shook her head, eyes down. Emma shoved her plate aside and muttered, "I'm not hungry." Adrian sat frozen, helpless, remembering the nights Sophia had turned dinners into games, transforming spoons into brave little boats sailing on adventure. Back then, the girls had laughed until their bellies hurt. Now there was only the clatter of cutlery echoing against cold porcelain. At night, Adrian often found himself standing before the door of the small room Sophia once occupied. The bed neatly made, the few books she left still lined on the shelf. He never stepped inside. He only lingered outside the threshold, as though opening the door would force him to confront the truth she was gone. He told himself she had been only a nanny, an employee, and leaving was natural. Yet every time he thought it, Memories surged back, the brightness in her eyes, the way she knelt to tie Emma's shoelaces, the gentle touch on his shoulder when she reminded him to keep his promise to be home. Adrian had never named the feeling, never dared admit it could be something more than gratitude. He wrapped it in a single word: thankfulness. But what kind of gratitude left a man gasping for air, simply because a laugh no longer filled the halls? His reason told him Sophia had chosen rightly, that the scholarship opened a future she deserved. But his heart refused, aching for her presence each time he looked at his daughters. The days dragged. A month after Sophia's departure, the changes were undeniable. Lily spoke even less, whispering only to Benny as though the bear were Sophia herself. Emma burst into sudden rages, smashing toys before collapsing into sobs. Adrian tried to hold them close, but his arms could not chase away their storms. Each night, when the girls finally fell asleep from sheer exhaustion, he sat alone in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, untouched. His gaze fixed on the emptiness before him. It was not just the absence of a nanny, it was the absence of hope. December brought with it the first heavy snow, and with it came a notice from the kindergarten, the annual family day. This year's theme was, "My Home." Each child would draw a picture of their family and present it on stage with their loved ones. When the teacher announced the event, the classroom buzzed with chatter, children eagerly sharing ideas of what they would draw and which parent they would bring. Only Lily and Emma sat still, their eyes downcast, tiny fingers drumming anxiously against the table. That afternoon, as Adrian came to collect them, the teacher gently pulled him aside, her voice lowered. "I'm afraid the girls don't seem eager to participate. When I asked, Emma told me, our family is missing someone," and Lily just bowed her head, clutching Benny. "Mr. Cole, I think they're carrying a sorrow deeper than we realize." The words sank into Adrian's chest like a weight. Driving home, the rearview mirror reflected two small figures sitting silently in the back seat. Emma staring out the window, Lily holding Benny tight against her chest. He tried, his voice light. "Family Day will be fun. If you two draw a picture, Daddy will frame it and hang it in the living room." But neither answered. Only the faint sigh of Lily filled the car. That evening, over dinner, Adrian tried again. "Family Day is a chance to be proud of your home. Don't you want to join in?" Emma slammed her spoon down, eyes brimming with tears. "We don't have a full family to bring. If Miss Sophia isn't there, then it's not a family." The words cut through him like a blade. He sat frozen, staring at Emma's defiant yet trembling face, then turned to see Lily weeping quietly, burying her head in Benny's fur. He wanted to gather them both, to tell them everything was still whole, but he knew that would be a lie. That night, Adrian lingered alone in the living room. Outside, snow fell, steadily, white flakes drifting past the glass. The wine in his glass went untouched, its surface dark and still. Emma's words repeated in his mind, "If Miss Sophia isn't there, then it's not a family." And with a painful clarity, he realized his daughters had spoken the truth he could not admit aloud. Sophia's absence had not only silenced the home, it had stripped away the fragile sense of family he thought he had lost and miraculously regained. As the day approached, excitement filled the classroom. Children chattered about costumes and rehearsed songs, while Lily and Emma grew even quieter. One morning, Adrian found Lily at her little desk. On the blank page before her was a drawing of an empty house. She scratched out the roof again and again, as though trying to erase it, then slowly wrote a single letter. S. Adrian stepped closer, intending to ask, but when Lily lifted her gaze, her eyes shimmered with tears. The question died in his throat. On the eve of Family Day, Adrian sat alone once more, the soft lamp casting its glow over the notice in his hand. His phone lit up with a familiar number, Sophia's. His thumb hovered over the call button, his chest tight with longing, but fear held him still. He hadn't pressed it. The apartment remained hushed, save for the sound of snow-laden winds outside, winds that seemed to whisper, urging him toward a decision. Adrian's finger froze on the glowing screen where the name Sophia appeared. The pounding of his heart drowned out the sound of the storm outside. He drew in a deep breath, realizing for the first time that his hands were trembling over nothing more than a phone call. Then, as if afraid he might lose his courage, he pressed the button. The ringing stretched on, each tone pulling his nerves tighter, until her voice answered at last. Soft, hesitant, familiar. "Hello?" He paused, pulse hammering, then forced the words out. "Sophia. It's me." A silence followed, so long it felt like judgment, until she asked carefully, "Mr. Cole, what is it?" He straightened, both hands gripping the phone. "Lily and Emma. They refused to join Family Day. They said if you're not there, then they don't have a family to bring. I don't know what to do." On the other end, Sophia bit her lip as her eyes blurred. She had tried to pull herself away from that life, but one sentence was enough to tear her apart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never thought it would end like this." Adrian shook his head, though she could not see it. "No, don't apologize. The fault is mine. I let you go when I should have held on. But Sophia," his voice cracked, rough in his throat, "I need to know. Where are you? Have you left already? Or are you still in Chicago?" The line went still, then her voice came, unsteady. I'm still here. I haven't left yet. A friend helped me apply for a scholarship. It was accepted. But I need time to decide." Adrian surged to his feet, heart about to burst. His words came quick, decisive. "Tell me where you are. Give me the address." She hesitated, then at last recited it softly. Half an hour later, the black sedan stopped before an old building at the city's edge. Sophia stood on the steps wrapped in a thin scarf, her shadow stretching long across the snow. When the headlights dimmed, she saw Adrian step out. Tall, broad, but with a tension in his face unlike any other time. He stopped before her, his breath rising in clouds of white. "I came," he said quietly, "because if I waited until morning, I might be a coward and stay silent again." Sophia clutched at her sleeve, her voice breaking. "You didn't have to do this. I've already decided." Adrian shook his head, cutting her off. "No, Sophia. I know you're still torn, I can hear it. And I need to tell you this. I am grateful for all you've done, but I am also terrified. I am terrified of losing someone, again, the way I lost my wife. I am terrified I am not good enough to make you stay. And I am terrified that if you return and leave once more, Lily and Emma will break even worse." His voice dropped, his eyes locked onto hers with a rawness that could not be denied. "But stronger than all those fears is this. My daughters need you. And if I'm honest, I need you too, more than I ever dared to admit." Tears rolled down Sophia's cheeks, but in her gaze flickered a fragile light. She whispered, "But what about the scholarship? What about my dream?" Adrian stepped forward, his trembling hand closing around hers. "Choose both. Finish your dream, but stay with us too. I will find a way. Just don't leave Lily and Emma again." And in that moment, in the middle of a snowbound night, two people long bound by loss finally spoke the truth. Not a polished promise, not a fairy tale vow, but the bare honesty of fear and longing. And within that vulnerability, a new faith was born. The next morning, a thin layer of snow blanketed the rooftops, and pale winter sunlight filtered through heavy clouds, casting cold light across the streets. Adrian woke Lily and Emma, helped them into their uniforms, tied their hair, laced their shoes. The girls went through the motions quietly, brushing their teeth, eating a few spoonfuls of cereal without a smile. They weren't excited, yet they allowed their father to guide them to the door. Adrian looked at them both and whispered, "Today, just trust Daddy once more." The kindergarten was livelier than ever. The hall was decorated with balloons and children's drawings. Little ones darted about, showing off their family portraits and chattering about who had come with them. Lily and Emma stepped inside slowly, their steps heavy. Adrian walked beside them, eyes fixed on the entrance, heart pounding faster with each beat. Then, the door opened, and a familiar figure appeared. Sophia stood there, hair falling soft over her shoulders, her gray coat dusted with snow, her eyes glowing with the same gentle warmth they had always carried. In that instant, the whole hall seemed to blur, leaving only her. Benny slipped from Lily's arms as she cried out, "Miss Sophia!" Both girls bolted forward, sobbing into her embrace. Their cries filled the room, but no one thought it strange. Parents smiled, some discreetly wiping tears. Sophia held them tightly, her hands trembling as she stroked their backs, whispering, "I'm sorry I left. But I'm here now." Emma lifted her tear-streaked face, her voice firm. "Don't leave again. If you do, we'll lose our family." Sophia nodded, clutching them closer, a vow in the beating of her heart. When it was their class's turn, the four of them walked onto the stage. Adrian stood slightly behind, while the twins held Sophia's hands tightly, their eyes shining with renewed trust. The host smiled and asked, "Lily, Emma, would you like to present your picture?" Emma raised her chin, her voice clear and strong. "This is our family. Now, we're not missing anyone." The hall fell silent for a beat, then erupted in thunderous applause. Adrian glanced down at Sophia, his eyes brimming though his lips curved into a smile. Among the audience, Evelyn was there. She had come unannounced, wanting to witness her granddaughter's first big event. When she saw Sophia holding the girl's hands, radiant with joy, Evelyn slowly nodded. She didn't speak, but that single nod was enough for Adrian to understand. Her quiet disapproval had softened into silent acceptance. For the first time, 3 generations of the Cole family beat in unison. After the ceremony, the 4 of them stepped outside. Snow still fell, but a thin shaft of sunlight pierced the gray sky. Lily skipped beside Sophia, while Emma clung to Adrian's hand, chattering proudly about her bravery on stage. Adrian paused, turned to Sophia, his voice rough. "Thank you for coming back. Because of you, the girls can smile like this again." Sophia smiled, her eyes bright with faith. "We'll learn together how to be a family. Not a perfect one, but a real one." And so the 4 of them walked on through the white streets, 2 small hands clasped in 2 larger ones, their footprints short and long mingled in the snow. The road ahead, though cold, seemed to glow with light. And in each heart, for the first time in years, the word family no longer meant an aching emptiness, but something whole, warm, and real. Perhaps family never begins with perfection. It is mended through cracks, built by those brave enough to stay, and held together by small arms clinging to the ones they love. Adrian, Sophia, Lily, and Emma found one another not because fate decreed it, but because their hearts refused to let go. If this story made you believe once more that love and patience can heal even the emptiest of voids, leave a number in the comments. How many points out of 10 would you give this journey? Don't forget to like, share the video to spread the message of connection and compassion, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories that touch the heart. Because sometimes, the greatest miracle is not finding a perfect family, but finding one that chooses to stay together.